Thank you. Yeah, so I was saying that I'll take this question um, from a political economy perspective. There are two very important things that should be done if there's going to be meaningful solution in this regard. Number one, there is need for um, economic reawakening, right? Economy, because at the moment we have economic and political conditions that have held us or held the African people spellbound. So these economic conditions will not allow for a proper independence of media outfits. All right, you see this dependency playing out in different factors. For example, you have institutional influence. Right, Western-led organizations often impose good governance and structural adjustment as conditions for aid. And when you say good governance and structural adjustment as conditions for aid, it means it has to be within the, in fact, quote unquote, it has to be within the context of what they have defined as good governance. Anything outside of this concept is strikes you out of the precondition for such aid. All right, which oftentimes puts us in a situation that reminds us of new colonialism. So for any meaningful effort to be made in that direction, institutional influences has to be cut off. How? By building or developing the institutions, the local or national institutions within the African states. And of course, that can also extend by creating reasonable regional corporations, to bridge that gap. And then there's also the problem of funding, right? In 2005, significant aid was cut from major Western economies such as the US, Germany, and the rest of them uh, to low-income African nations, right? Oftentimes, when this funding is cut off, there is little or nothing that these outfits can do. And then there is also the problem of trade dependency. If your product is being bought by a particular client, the day that client is unwilling to buy your product, the chances are great that your products are going to become perishable goods. So it is so important that Africa must not sit down and watch the new scramble for Africa to play in auto mode. All right, it has to be resisted with diplomacy. You see, Samuel Huntington, in his book in 1996, The Clash of Civilization, had put up an argument. The central argument is that the future global conflict will be driven by cultural and religious differences between distinct civilizations rather than ideological or economic ones. He actually pointed to very significant issues, about 8 of them, that that suggest, interactions between the global world and developing economies. So if you look at the predictions that Samuel Huntington had put forward in that book, it would become really clear that what you see today is the remaking of the world, in a much more cultural sense. It is changing from the traditional method of power struggle to the more cultural ones of how you tell your stories and how you want your stories to be known, and all. Of course, what it is called propaganda. Yeah, propaganda. So the use of propaganda to control public opinion and narratives. So if any serious effort is expected, then I think that liberating Africa is going to be one of such agenda. And in liberating Africa, we must make sure that funding or trading is emphasized against rentierism. African states should afford to finance their projects and gradually shift away from being described as rent-seeking states. We have resources. These resources can be put to use in ways that can allow us to compete, if not with the global world. At least we can start the competition from our regional neighbors or continental neighbors and take it out to the globe. So as long as we remain dependent, as long as we remain rent-seeking, as long as we do not have real economic independence, as long as our political dependence or political independence is not genuine, then every other thing that we seek to achieve is going to be tied to the apron strings of these imperialists that are coming in with all forms of neo-colonialism or new imperialism. Thank you. I would charge that we must be careful to understand firsthand that the colonialists, the imperialists are here for what we have, not necessarily for charity or support of democratic institutions. It is the resources that is the driving force for engagement or intervention, if you like. And bearing that in mind, I want to remind us that if we mismanage information, we might ourselves be igniting what is called a proxy war, which is an armed conflict where at least one of the combatants is directed by an external power. And I want to cite relevant examples of such. You know, if you remember the Vietnam War, I mean, if you remember the Vietnam War, you see that on the one hand, you had Vietnam, on the other hand, you had Korea, and the US and the Soviet Union fought for ideological supremacy, you know, from that. By the end of the day, it was both it was both Vietnam and Korea that actually counted their losses. If you move away from there to go to the Soviet-Afghan War of 1979 to 1989, you see you'll discover that the US had funded the Mujahideen or something, the Mujahideen to bleed the invading Soviet forces. You know, if you also move away to the Yemen civil war, you see a modern conflict where Saudi Arabia was supporting the government and Iran was supporting the Houthi rebel, right? Having vied for regional dominance. So some of this context, these examples gives us a context to understand that if we mismanage information, it may actually give room for a proxy war where we suffer, and these same people would come with humanitarian intervention that does not mean any humanitarian gesture, but using humanitarian intervention as a mere cover to actually exploit and extend their domination and control over what we probably know as it is today. So citizen journalism is so important that if you see something, say something, but you must report only what is verifiably correct. You cannot afford to send out narratives that is false. You cannot afford to give out information that is misleading. You cannot afford to mismanage sensitive information that you are privy to by reason of your professional practice. So if we bring this together in mind, we would be emphasizing certain key issues. One, professionalism in information management. Two would be advancement of state purpose. If you have a national, and I think that this is the advancement of state purpose should be integrated into the national orientation programs of the National Orientation Agency, where specialized programs are prepared, where trainings are prepared, or rather, media practitioners are put through necessary training of programs to understand proper reportage, right, where necessary. And like I always say, no matter what prescription is put on the table to solving the problems in Africa, The root of such solution must be grounded in human security, which is allowing a proper avenue, a legitimate avenue for human subsistence, without which no tangible progress can be made. Thank you.